Hey, John. Well, thank you for joining me today. So you can tell me a little bit about your story about WineHive and how it all started.
Thank you, Oscar. Happy to be here.
Great, man. I loved having you.
Yeah, so WineHive, project that I was working on after I graduated industrial design school. So I started college and architecture school. I missed the first year of industrial design, being in architecture, and then I switched my second year into industrial design. And the first year, all the freshman designers did this cool wine rack project that, when I started my sophomore year, I saw all these cool wine racks up on the walls in the studios, and I was meeting all the students that designed them, but I hadn't participated. So I was always thinking in the background, what could I create? And I was always thinking I could make at least as cool of a wine rack, if not cooler. So that was the seed that was planted early on, probably 2009. And then, throughout the next few years in design school, was thinking about it more. And then, ultimately after graduating and getting that shower door design job, that's when the wheels started turning. And fast forward to 2012, launching on Kickstarter. That's when everything started becoming official with it.
Nice. So when you started in Kickstarter, what was your goal once you did the campaign there?
The original funding goal was $15,000. And so that would be enough to barely cover a minimum production run of aluminum extrusion, pay for all the anodizing, the packaging, materials, labor, the extrusion die costs. So 15 with a very slim profit margin would get me, off the ground. But I was blown away. We ended up doing over $70,000 in less than 30 days. So I'm still super grateful to this day for all my backers.
So I've seen a lot of campaigns on that, and they usually give you something. What was the incentive for people that you were giving them?
So it was the product itself, which I had done some research on previously successful Kickstarter projects, and the majority of the funding came from the product itself. Some people will have like a cheaper souvenir or some sort of, gift that's related to the product. But, 80% or more of all the funding came from at least the smallest amount of product itself. So I really wanted to give people the minimum viable product, which I had deemed to be essentially a 6-bottle kit. And so I had gotten creative with how to provide that for $25, $50, $100. So we started out with a half honeycomb shape in the beginning, like 3 V's kind of combined. I guess it'd be a third of a honeycomb. And so that was like a stackable pyramid shape for bottles. And so you could fit up to 6 bottles. And so that was the entry level $25 reward. And then it went up from there. The more you enclose the full honeycomb, the more we'd obviously have to charge for it, the more parts it needs. But basically, $25 and up was the minimum buy-in to fund the project.
Wow. And from the time that someone went in there to your campaign and placed an order for, the product, when was the timeline for you to actually give it to them to develop it?
It took several months. So the Kickstarter project itself was 30 days. So March 2012 to April 2012 was the funding period. And then Kickstarter takes a couple weeks to collect payments from everybody, transfer it to the project creator. And then from there, I was able to immediately purchase tooling. It took about 7 to 8 weeks to get the first samples for production. And then it was another 7 to 8 weeks to start production. And then you had, 2 to 3 weeks for packaging. So, all said and done, it was several months. And I certainly learned, my first successful Kickstarter project to estimate what you think it'll take and then at least double it. There are always delays. So
that's good.
For the most part, we got everything out. Top quality, a little bit delayed, but it did come out, and I think everybody was blown away with it. So
I think that, it got my attention immediately when you showed it to me, and I saw your site. I saw all the different types of design. I was very drawn to the black color, and but it just depends on your aesthetics at your home, right? And the way, people, I've seen the pictures that you've done some restaurants as well. There's bars and homes, right? So I think the design of it is really great. I love the honeycomb aspect. What prompted you to make it a beehive type?
The honeycomb inspiration really came from asking, how would nature design a wine rack? What would be the most efficient material usage, the highest density bottle storage? So taking some cues from nature, from honeycombs, from beehives, it's literally the most space efficient wine rack in the world. So you literally can't beat the honeycomb's space efficiency. So it seemed to be a pretty good role model to use. Also, it looks great. Geometric design is one of the most timeless designs. So that also plays a role into the sustainability part of it. Not just the materials and manufacturing, but the product itself, the design. It's something that you want to keep around. It's not going to just be trendy, after 3 months, then you throw it away. This is an heirloom product, really. You can pass it down from one generation to another.
No, it is. And I see it like that. I think I just love the honeycomb design of it. I love that you could fit different size bottles in here, right? When I look at my wine fridge, there's only certain sizes that you could put in 34 or 40 bottles in there, or you can only put half of them because of the different size of bottles, right? And I think you did it very well, from more of the standard bottles to a little bit more larger format bottles actually fit on your wine rack, right? So that was a good idea to do that. But I mean, obviously, my concern was like the weight. It looks like it is heavy, and I was a little bit more concerned about how do I hang it. But you also did the brackets, everything that comes to it. What's like what I see in the back? That works really cool. It works. I was so concerned about it. Like you send me the brackets and so forth. I'm going, oh man, I got to find the studs, and I have to go figure this thing out. And what if it falls when I already put all the wine in, and it falls down and destroyed?
Yeah, it's a little bit overkill right now. It's a little bit over-engineered. But I wanted it to be super sturdy, super strong. And I have a lot of people that make, even more, risky configurations than what you see behind me, where they'll have like a cantilevered section. And so having that structural integrity was really important to me. And so the product you have there, the product you see behind me, that's the WineHive Cell, the first generation of that product line. And we do have a new version coming out shortly that will be using much less material with the same interlocking profile. So I'm certainly working towards, using less materials, reducing weight, reducing footprint, but still having as much, if not more, structural integrity. So that was always a key driver to me. But to your point about the different bottle sizes, thanks for pointing that out, and I'm glad all your bottles fit. It was definitely a controversy for me in the beginning of, do I allow all bottles to fit? Do I target, the 80 to 90% of bottles that people will store? So that decision was made after, gathering some data. What are the most common bottle sizes? Bordeaux bottles, Burgundy bottles, champagne bottles, Magnum bottles, and taking a look at, okay, well, I think, it sounds like 80 to 90% of all these people want to, maximize their bottle density for their standard 750 milliliter bottles. And then if and when they need Magnum storage, we'll go with a slightly larger diameter product they could use in their Magnum section. And so by using the standard bottle size for production, like the one you have there, if you were to take out those 3 sections in the middle, you could fit larger bottles inside. And so by using the negative space voids, you now enable larger format bottle storages with the standard size. And then we also have the Magnum size as well, if you wanted something that could store Magnums, without creating the voids. So
very nice.
Try to have something for everybody there. Try to keep everybody happy.
We were talking about this earlier, but I really like the fact that the cooling of it, right? So and then it has a nice temperature. Obviously, you said the way an aluminum does, and how we have it normally. Our homes are usually at a really nice temperature. We're always blowing the AC, and how it absorbs that, and it keeps our bottles nice and nice at a good room temperature, and actually a little bit more cooler than that, which is really neat. Was that something that you were thinking about it as well in your design?
It was, yeah. That was, material was very important to me. And you're right. If you touch it, it is cool to the touch.
Right.
So aluminum as a material obviously has multiple benefits, but the Heatsink function was very critical, in designing obviously a wine rack that'll be in wine cellars. So, the idea that you could have a material that absorbs the ambient temperature of your room, thereby reducing the amount of energy and electricity required to cool your room, because it's now storing that thermal mass at a cooler temperature, seemed like a huge win. And then also it was infinitely recyclable. Also, it could be anodized in beautifully modern finishes. So it had a lot of advantages. But yeah, the Heatsink is certainly one of the big ones.
Are you planning to do any other types of colors for your customers?
Definitely. So, well, you can see behind me, we have the standard silver satin finish. Mm-hmm. And then this is a new one. I know it's kind of far away, but it's darker. It's a gray pewter.
Okay.
Still working on that name of the finish, but a little bit darker, more of like a titanium kind of graphite finish in between the silver and the black one that you have. And so currently we have the three finishes, but we are able to custom color match any finish. And, so if you wanted like a oil rub bronze, a nickel, gold, light bronze, rose gold. A lot of people like to do a custom color match for a big custom seller. So we do that often. And then we are looking at expanding our smaller standard kit finishes as well.
A friend of mine really liked your design on it. And, coming from an engineering background that he has from Germany, he was like, that was so well thought out, the way he put this together. And I was like, wow, double PhD guy telling me that. And I'm like, yeah, he's super intelligent. I go, you put this thing together. It's beautiful. I love the ergonomics about it, how all the different types of bottles could fit in here and so forth. So,
well, if a German loves it, I am so grateful that their engineering is always, some of the best in the world. So that means a lot to me.
Right. When he said it to me, I was like, okay, I got to tell John that, because when I get to see you, but I'm like, that was the first compliment I received from him when he came to our home. That's the first thing that stood out. He saw that piece on and he was like, that is a really nice piece, Oscar, and, he goes and observes this, and sees the little screws, how it's interlocked and how it slides in together. I had him take it apart with the little screws, and you could see it move it back and forth. So the interlocking and so forth. So that was pretty good. He analyzed it pretty well. And gave it a compliment. So
engineers totally geek out on this product. It's just like Legos for winos. So you get like the wine lovers that love it, design lovers, engineering nerds. I consider myself all the above. But to your point, it's funny. Earlier you were talking about the different finishes from Kickstarter. So the black finish that you have, I wasn't actually offered in the beginning. It was really just the standard silver finish. Mm-hmm. But during Kickstarter, I got the attention of Uncrate, eventually Forbes, and we got picked up by a bunch of different press outlets. And then all these restaurants wanted these black anodized custom orders. And then eventually Neil Patrick Harris wanted one. So I was like, I guess we're doing black. So since basically day one, it's been black and silver now. And it's been almost equally as popular as the silver. It's about 60-40 split, silver to black.
It's very aesthetically pleasing. Really does complement a room. So what's been like one of your biggest hurdles of starting your business?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always say if I knew how much time and money was involved, I probably wouldn't have started a business. I think, being naive and, 24 at the time, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I just kind of, went into it without giving more thought. But, turns out it's pretty hard to start a brand from scratch. So, aside from, the obvious product manufacturing challenges, You've got marketing, you've got sales, distribution, operations, and I came from, the product design, manufacturing side of things. So I felt confident with that. And, Kickstarter, if you can successfully, fund and fulfill a Kickstarter project, I think you can start a business.
Right.
And so, that was really the big hurdle to me. And I gave myself basically a runway. That was the milestone, the hurdle. I said, okay, I'm leaving my corporate job. I had a nice cushy, R&D corporate job. But I'm like, you know what? I want to give this a shot. And I gave myself a 12-month runway to launch on Kickstarter. And I thought, if it works out, great. If not, I could always get another job. And
right.
So, the first hurdle was getting everything launched on Kickstarter, getting funded. I was blown away with the results from there. And that was, now April 2012 that we officially, I guess, became a thing. WineHive was a product you could find online, and we were shipping to people. But since then, I've had to learn pretty much every other aspect of starting, running and growing a business. Prior to Kickstarter, I had no formal business training. It was really industrial design, manufacturing, biomimicry. Since then, I've taken some business courses, and certainly, experience is the best teacher. So just having to keep a business afloat for now 8 years, I think was more than enough education for me. But the big hurdles have really been, improving the product while staying in business. I think that's pretty hard.
And I think you coming from an engineering design concept, sometimes, the people that I know in that industry like that are so product driven, right? They don't really, they could get lost in details and making things better. And there goes the R&D budget, right? It just starts growing and growing and growing. And then where's your sales and distribution and your product funds that you're going to need to take after that? And sometimes you have a great product, but then again, you're like, okay, how am I going to go sell it again now? Because I ran out of cash for my advertising budget, right? So,
absolutely.
You've done it. I mean, I love that.
Look, I'm guilty of it too. Engineers, designers, we just want to tinker. Right. And, I have to catch myself. And it's really challenging at times to not just pour every hour, every dollar you have back into R&D. But at the end of the day, what's the saying? Perfection is the enemy of progress, something like that. I'm probably butchering it, but it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, it's got to be good enough to ship. Right. And then once you ship it, make it better. So, for me, getting version 1.0 out the door back in 2012 was the biggest milestone. That almost put me out of business, just trying to get the first one made. I had a lot of surprises from my manufacturer that weren't explained to me. And a lot of it was my own fault too, my first time in business like that. But I certainly learned, but luckily, we got version 1.0 out. People were happy with it. And then version 2.0, version 3.0. And so, the one that you have, that's the third iteration of WineHive.
Wow.
And so I've been able to improve functionality while decreasing costs. So always just trying to make it, more for less. So that's been the biggest challenge, is just to continually innovate while keeping the lights on.
Usually a startup will die out, go out of business within the first 5 years, right? So we see that you obviously put a lot of work into it. You're already in your 8th year. You're improving. You were able to make different iterations of your product. And that's like, a lot of businesses don't even get that, right? They get to just have that one product and keep working really hard to get enough distribution established. Is most of your product, is it all sourced here in the US? Is it all from here? Or
I think people make mistakes often. I think, a lot of times different departments or your different, co-founders don't talk to one another, and they might overinvest on inventory. They might overinvest on, marketing and advertising.
Oh yeah.
Look, if your product sucks, your product sucks. If you pour all your money into marketing, people just find out that it sucks sooner.
Yeah, like, exactly.
You got to make a product that people want. So, yeah, I mean, that was one of the biggest challenges. But I think, to your point, that's where people go wrong. A lot of times, go out of business. And you got to make sure you got that optimal balance of the right product with the right marketing, and then obviously improve both as you go. But yeah, it's currently made in the U.S. So I've got great manufacturers, contract manufacturers here domestically. The one behind me, the one that you have, the WineHive cell, is produced in Louisville, Kentucky. And we have another version, the WineHive Classic, produced in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So, really trying to support domestic manufacturers. These factory jobs really aren't available like they used to be, back in the early days of the Detroit, car manufacturing days. Oh, yeah. So trying to do as much as I can to support, our workers here in the U.S. I think our generation now, we don't want to buy from a faceless corporation, right? We want to know, we want to have a relationship with the people that made it. What's your story? Why'd you come up with this product, this business? Why'd you risk everything to start this business? That story really resonates with people.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's really one of the reasons why we're making everything here in the US. And we are going to be sharing some content shortly where we'll have, the people making it. You can see the hands making the WineHive, packing it, anodizing it. So that's really exciting to show. So making everything domestically, I can make a fully custom made to order product that ships in, 5 to 7 weeks.
And I think that's really good. I mean, even when I think about, when you said about Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, I ordered something for my dog. And it's just the collar, it's a really robust collar, the ones that, protection dogs use and so forth. And when he told me the lead times were 6 to 8 weeks, I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, everything is made here. This is what we do. When he told me his story over the phone, I said, I'll wait. It's okay. Yeah. I'll go buy the inexpensive one at Petco just for now while I wait for his premium product. So I think people, once we know it's made here, we know the story behind it and what they're doing to really bring in that high quality, people are willing to wait, right? So, and I think that's a controllable, because then we're just like we give them that time, but when we get the product, it does live up to it. I mean, product.
And now you've got that story now, whether it's your dog collar, your wine cellar. Right. I mean, you have family, you have friends over, and it's a conversation piece, and you're like, well, let me tell you about this. I know the story behind it. I know the people that made it. This collar was handmade. It's not going to fall apart in 2 months. I'm not going to go back to Petco and buy a new one.
Exactly.
It's handmade leather or whatever it is. It's it's quality.
Right.
I think that's missing. And before the mass production industrialization age, things were handmade. Things were handcrafted. They took time by real people, and we have machines. We have AI now, and it's going to continue to accelerate to be, even quicker, more efficient, time-wise, energy-wise. But, people like people. Right. And people resonate with stories. And, it's, especially in the wine industry. I mean, we're the epitome of people that, love a handcrafted bottle of wine that was, farmed properly. And you're hearing the story about everything from, why'd you pick this acreage? Tell me about this slope. Why are you planting these grapes here and not these grapes? Why are you cellaring this way? And you've got a story. And a lot of our heritage, our handmade decisions here, within WineHive are inspired from the wine industry, and other industries as well. And the handmade story, it resonates with people, and it shows.
So you chose a very niche market. I love that. You came out with a very niche product. You already have the market to support it, and it's been a very retroactive relationship, right? It's easier to market to as well, because you're not just trying to blanket, every builder that's building a house and so forth. It's,
it's definitely not for everybody.
It's not for everyone, right? So I think obviously having a strategic market is was really good for you, right? Starting at 24 years old, right after college, and having a little bit of corporate history behind you and experience.
Well, it's funny. It's funny, Oscar. When I first started out, you're right. I was, I had just graduated college, and I had my first real job, so I felt like a millionaire.
Right.
Especially compared to my buddies that were either still in college or hadn't yet found a job. And so I had some extra money to throw around. I had started getting into wine, and I wanted to have a cool wine rack that could fit my space and would look cool, and I could add to it as my collection grows. And so I was kind of, scratching my own itch in the beginning, but it's funny, I joke about it, over the next few years, I would obviously really have to put every dollar I have into WineHive to really grow it. And if you think about any, classic entrepreneur story, it's usually, requiring you live broker than you ever would imagine for years until things finally pick up. But, the great irony, I always joke, is that, being broke for so long, trying to grow WineHive, how ironic now trying to market a luxury wine rack, when you're a broke entrepreneur. And so, I have to think back to the days when I first started, when I had that feeling of just overall excitement for showcasing my wine collection, wanting to grow it over time, and, wanting a product that could do that. And then now, sort of coming out of the other end of the broke entrepreneur days, still have a long way to go, but there's certainly light at the end of the tunnel. It's funny. I still joke about it to this day, the great irony there.
Entrepreneur. We've all been there. I've been part of 2 startups, and everyone asks, don't you ever want to go back to do that? I said, in my heart, I do. I go, but I don't want to go through that again. Because it's the best moments when you start it and when you sell it. That's about it. The in between, when you think about it, you're just like, I remember that day we were like looking for those paychecks to come in, the customers to pay us on time, to make payroll, to take care of things, right? So it's definitely, it takes a lot of thought into it. It takes one to know one of how, when you're starting up a company, and how much you're gonna have to dedicate, and how you're gonna really make a difference in your product, right? And if your product's really gonna outlive you.
Huge point you just touched on. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's actually one of my founding inspirations. So my grandfather, he had a cutlery business.
Okay.
And he eventually sold it, but it was called Walco, WALCO. They made super high-end steak knives, cutlery, and every now and then I'll see it at restaurants. I go out to a nice steakhouse or other restaurants, and I always turn over the knives and I'll see Walco. And my grandfather passed away in 92, but his legacy still lives on. I'm still seeing his steak knives. This was back in Connecticut, and I'm here in California seeing him at restaurants. And so, I'm getting the goosebumps now just thinking about it. But, to me, that was the legacy inspiration that I want to leave behind, with WineHive. And, I feel like I'm just getting started. So I'm blown away that you and so many people love the current iterations, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, God, I already know how to make it 1,000 times better. So it's exciting. There are a lot of cool things coming up.
Thanks, John, again for your time. Thank you for sending me this great product. I look forward for the new iteration that I could, in the self-standing one, the freestanding one, that I could move around.
The Oscar edition.
Yeah, the Oscar edition. Hey, you say you like taking constructive criticism, right? Well, that's what I
love it. The more the merrier.
Exactly. Well, thanks a lot, man.
We're long overdue for a glass of wine and Temecula, so I'm sure we'll be seeing each other soon.
Absolutely, that or up in Paso Robles, right? That's either or. We're not there's both places are great places to enjoy. So thanks a lot again for your time. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing great things that are coming from your company.
You're very welcome, Oscar. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome.